I think the first question we need to ask is, why on earth would I grind my own flour? This is so extra. Hey friends, I'm Steph from StephanieJenkins.com and CheapskateCook.com. We're gonna get into why on earth I would grind my own flour and why that helps me save money and eat healthy. Disclosure on the front end here, I don't think everybody should do this. This is not a good fit for everyone. But the truth is, this one really weird, kind of out there crunchy thing has actually been a huge money saver and a great way for us to save money and eat healthy over the last 10 years. I love baking, genuinely. And so this whole idea of baking my own bread, baking our own muffins, biscuits, tortilla, whatever it is that we bake, it made sense to try to do the best that we can with that. If I wasn't a baker and I hated baking bread, flour grinder's not gonna help me save money and eat healthy. It's just gonna help me do more of the thing that I hate, which I'm not gonna do. Watch this video and decide for yourself. I'm not gonna get into the weeds about nutrition and science and pseudoscience and pseudo-nutrition when it comes to whole grains. Not everyone wants to eat grains, not everyone wants to eat whole wheat. I'm just gonna show you how and why a flour mill and whole grains work for us. The first question is, why on earth would you buy a grain mill? Honestly, if you have ever had whole wheat anything from whole wheat flour bought at the store, it's not great. It's pretty awful, actually. I grew up with a grain mill and grinding our own whole wheat flour and baking our own bread. So the decision to purchase one and use it was very easy for me because I knew how much more delicious, how far superior in taste and quality freshly ground wheat is compared to what I can buy at the store. And long term, by purchasing the grain in bulk, being able to store it at my house, grinding it when I need it, being able to purchase all different kinds of whole grain, so even gluten-free ones, or ancient grains like einkorn and spelt. This is a huge money saver over time. What kind of grain mill do I have? I have a Wonder Mill. It actually used to be called Whisper Mill back in the day. Totally not whispery, it's so freaking loud. But it's the same model that I grew up with, and so I was familiar with it and it made sense. And I've had it for like 12 years and it's still going strong. They really, I mean, they are sturdy machines. A lot of people like Nutrimills or Mock Mills. I would love to try a Mock Mill sometime. I usually store my grain mill in this cupboard over here. Kind of a messy cupboard, it's tucked out of the way. But when I'm ready to grind some flour, which is, I don't know, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, I'll pull it out, set it on the counter. My grain stays right on that counter, so it's easy to get to. If I don't keep this as easy as possible, then I'm not gonna bother to grind my own flour. It's already so extra. No need to make it more complicated. The Wonder Mill is a 2-part flour grinder, so it has the main flour grinding part, and that's the part that I store in the cupboard. You can take the lid off and you put the grain right in there. The message here is really important. Never, ever, ever pour grain into your grain mill without turning it on first. My Wonder Mill has 3 different settings, so I can set it for more pastries, which would be cookies, cakes, that kind of thing, bread, and coarse, which I would use if I was grinding corn for cornmeal. I typically just keep it at bread, even if I'm planning to use it for muffins. It works just fine. The second part of the Wonder Mill is the actual flour container. So after the wheat berries have been ground into flour, they shoot through this little tube and into the bin. You can unhook it from the Wonder Mill, open it up, and see the flour inside. I really do like having a separate flour container because then I can just pop it in the fridge and use it throughout the week. The flour container has this little spongy part in the top that just helps air escape the container. If you don't keep it somewhat clean, it eventually clogs up with flour and then it'll explode. Not that I know anything about that. This little container here also tends to fill up with flour and needs to be emptied pretty regularly. Next question, what kind of grain do I use to make into flour? So flour is made from these things called wheat berries, and there are all kinds of wheat berries. Considering at the grocery store, we usually just choose between white flour and whole wheat. It is shocking all the different kinds of whole wheat there are out there. Some whole wheat, like soft white whole wheat berries, are actually perfect for making pastries and pies and cookies and cake. And some, like hard red wheat berries, are really good for making like really flavorful brown whole wheat bread. So it can be a little bit overwhelming trying to figure out what kind of wheat berries to buy, but pretty much anywhere that you purchase the wheat berries will tell you what that kind of berry is perfect for. So that can be overwhelming when you're first learning, but it ends up not being that big a deal. Also, berry is just like another word for a grain, okay? It's not an actual berry, it's like, it looks like rice. For me, the huge money saver with the grain mill came when my family developed gluten sensitivities and we couldn't have regular flour for a long time. So I started purchasing spelt berries, which is like an older, more ancient, lower gluten version of wheat. Turns out everyone with gluten sensitivities in our house could handle the spelt just fine, and it was far less expensive than going full-on gluten-free, far less expensive than buying spelt flour in the little packets at the store, and it pretty much just acts like wheat flour, so it was delicious and easy to use. Other kinds of grains I've put through my flour mill, all the different kinds of wheat varieties. You could do einkorn, you could do oat groats, which is kind of like steel cut oats. You don't want to put rolled oats in there to make oat flour. You want to use like steel cut oats or these things called oat groats. Corn for cornmeal, chickpeas even for gluten-free chickpea flour, lots of different options. At this point in my life, I mostly use my flour grinder for spelt because that's what works best for us. Where do I buy whole grains? I buy them from a local co-op company called Bulk Natural Foods. You can order them through Azure Standard if you have a co-op in your area. You can even order them in smaller packets from Amazon, but I tend to buy them in like 50-pound bags because it's more economical and I know we're gonna use them. I store the spelt in these bins that are in my kitchen during the summer, and then I put them in the garage during the winter. They're just food safe 5-gallon buckets I got for like $5, I think, from Home Depot or Lowe's. And I always buy the lids that are really easy to get on and off. I also usually throw in a few bay leaves because those help keep critters out. But my bins and lids are all supposed to be critter safe. And they are food grade, which is also important. When the glass jar on the counter is empty, which only happens once every couple of months, I drag my grain bin over to the counter and I just fill it up again. For my family, I buy like 50 pounds of spelt at a time, and I only have to buy it like once or twice a year. My co-op only offers it once or twice a year, and I usually just evaluate how much I need and whether I need to go ahead and purchase some to get me through to the next order, or whether we're good because we haven't been doing a lot of baking. What do I make with my whole wheat flour? Everything. Anything. I've probably made everything. Some of it turns out better than others depending on what kind of flour I'm using, what kind of recipe I'm trying to use it for, but you name it, I've probably made it. Right now I mainly use spelt for our sourdough bread, muffins, and pancakes. Those are the main baked goods that we eat. I'm trying to keep things really simple around here, so even though I've tried a lot of things, not all the recipes make it to our regular rotation. All those recipes are on my blog and you can get them in the description. When baking with whole wheat, you get some people who want to make everything with 100% whole grain because white flour is kind of like the devil and you want to avoid it as much as possible. And I used to make as much as I could with spelt just because of our gluten sensitivities. But right now I mostly use it in sourdough, and sourdough is one of those things that also helps people with gluten sensitivities, and I'll usually just half it. So spelt flour is pretty dense, pretty crumbly. If I use 100%, they're gonna end up dense and crumbly. So even though it's not like the purest choice to use half whole wheat and half white flour, that's what I usually end up doing because that's what works for my family. If you have questions about whole grain, spelt flour, grinding your own flour, drop them in the comments and I will try to answer as many as I can. If I get enough, I'll make another video and just answer everything. I wish you could smell this because freshly ground flour smells amazing. Like so good. Maybe that's kind of weird. Maybe it's just because I grew up smelling it, but I'm not the only one. I've met lots of people who agree with me. We're pretty normal people. Like, we've got stuff to do. I'm not spending all of my time baking my own bread. But again, I've been doing this for like 10 years, so it's kind of just become a routine. Sometimes I'm baking more bread more often, sometimes I'm not. I'm always trying to balance real food with our real life and just be really practical about it. I hope that this video helped you decide whether you're crazy enough to try this or whether whether this is something that you can just pass on. Don't forget to drop any questions that you have in the comments. I'm Steph from StephanieJenkins.com and CheapskateCook.com, and I will see you next time for more ways to save money and eat healthy.